Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. We always have the issue this late in the day of people falling asleep because it's after lunch. So we'll try to entertain you. We're having some kind of technical difficulties and these screens aren't working, but if we can get them up, if they get up, they'll get up. But I think we'll be able to be okay without them. There's not anything super, there's no charts or anything that are super amazing for you. As he introduced, my name is John. My son and I started doing this when he was around 15 years old. He started speaking with me, he's 20 now, when he was 15 at events like this, which is kind of interesting. The topic we're doing today we haven't done before, but nonetheless it's something we can work on. We're going to be talking about, the reason we're here is talking about difficulties. You know, all the work that a lot of myself included, we do is kind of just assuming that everything's fine. You know, there's no tension in family dynamics, there's, you know, all this stuff like that. But the problem is a lot of times that's not true. And I would do these kinds of events, and at the end people start asking questions that I would take an entire session to answer their questions. So why don't we just do a whole session on problems that come up and how to deal with them. All right, so that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to let my son start off with the first one, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is the challenges with resistant children. So this is basically just going to be anything that got challenges at home. Like he was saying, not everything's perfect. You know, you're going to have some kids that just show no interest in wanting to talk about this. It feels super awkward for them and they don't want to. They kind of push away. And there are some times with children, you know, it's not if they have, you know, a learning disability or something like that, you know, that also is a factor into them being resistant. You know, it's not something that they can always help. And so that's some of the stuff we're going to be addressing today. Screens aren't working, so I can't show you this, but to start off, we want to ask you guys to send us text messages of what you guys think, what would like a resistant children, what would be an issue with resistant children, if you want to text. So the number you'll be texting is 503-515-6235, 503-515-6235. And so that's going to be the number that we'll be texting if you have any, basically trying to see what do you think a resistant child looks like? What is like something with that?
We will have some as well for you to do, but first of all, I want to make sure we're covering what you came to. Is there some issues that resistant children have that you don't know how to deal with?
Mm-hmm. Yep, and so I'll go ahead and read the number off one more time, just so you have it again. So it's 503-515-6235.
What is a resistant child?
A kid who you're trying to help them not look at pornography, and they're basically, I don't care. Or they defiantly do it anyway.
Yeah, so just basically they're not very willingly talking to you and going through it.
Is what I mean. Why don't you go ahead while he's going to go to the next one. So we can start doing, Lucas can start talking through some while you're texting your ideas.
So some of the challenges that we'll be addressing that we're going to be focusing on is so if there's a child that's unwilling to enter a conversation, they're not even going to bother starting with it. You know, you try to bring it up and start easing your way into the conversation, but they just totally put up the blocks and the blinds, and they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to address it with you. It makes them too uncomfortable. We also have a child that's dishonest about their feelings or behaviors. And so that's, you know, they tell you, but you can tell they're not totally being so honest with you or open about it. You know, they're holding some stuff back. They're not giving you the full story about their feelings, and you see their behaviors aren't necessarily always matching what they're telling you. And then we also have some other challenges with this is that a lot of times if parents, when they try really hard to try to break through to the resistant child, sometimes that can make the separation, the distance between them further if the child isn't receiving that very well. So that is also another issue when we talk about the resistant children.
Okay, here's some of our things.
Yeah. All right, so one I got. So hate anything that is a parent's idea. Yes, that is very true. That is, yeah, anything. It's definitely with children.
And we're just talking about the issues right now.
Yeah. No. And so that's definitely one. Aggressive, yes, like being an aggressive child, being aggressive about it for sure. Child, they won't sit down and talk, and they won't sit down long enough to talk about it. That is very true. Disconnected from friends and family, some social anxiety, difficulty expressing emotions. Okay. The feeling of entitlement, that they have a certain levels of freedom. Yep, that's definitely a big one. A child who has schizophrenia, who says that his voice has told him to do it. A child who is very defensive when discussing his mistakes in general, can't take correction. Yeah, I know those are all definitely really big issues. And so that's definitely some of these things we definitely will be addressing today. All right, so let's go ahead to the next one real fast. Child deals with autism, that's another one. So what happens when we're going to be talking about this, these are kind of challenges that you can expect to come across. And even if you and your children aren't experiencing these problems now, it could be maybe if you have, let's say you have grandchildren and your children are trying to, approach it with their children, or if you have friends and family you know of that are addressing this. These are all potential issues that can come up and some things that we'll be talking about. But some realistic outcomes you can expect when you go through the process we'll be talking about and when you go through everything with your child. Some of the outcomes you can expect is that the relationship between you and your child will be strengthened, because that is something I know we want to try to give you guys the encouragement to know that going through what we talk about and going through everything will strengthen the relationship between you and the child. Another idea I got here real quick. So I had a young adult with Asperger's syndrome struggling with understanding how much he understands and to work with him and the consequences for his behavior. And ADHD, yes. And the child thinks they know everything better than you do. And so another realistic outcome that we'll go through when we go through this segment also would be the child will become more aware of potential harms of pornography. So be able to address that and for you to be able to kind of break through those barriers to your child to help them understand the dangers of this. And another outcome that could potentially happen was that your child will be able to reflect on a relationship with your parents, with you guys, and understand the warnings about pornography and everything. So that'll be one of the other outcomes of this. So some different solutions that we'll have that we'll talk further on about this is we'll suggest different things for parent-child bonding activities. That's a potential solution you can do, and there's plenty of different books and websites and things that you can do on this to be able to have an experience and activity with your child so that it's not just a one-sided thing. It's not like you're just telling them, you got to do this, here's this list of stuff to do. There's also you are going through it with them, letting them know you're with them the whole way. And then also letting them know that you let them know that they don't have to agree with you, but that if you just ask them to let them share why they're concerned. So you can tell them, I'm concerned about this, I have this issue, we want to help you through this, and letting them know that just because they might not agree with you, might not see eye to eye with you, that you're at least letting them know that you're there with them, that you want to help them through it. And there's also some of the other solutions we talked about. So there's Fight the New Drug. They have documentaries out, and those are some potential solutions you can watch with your child. And also sharing your stories with them is a big part that helps, because I know a lot of it is making it personal with them, because a lot of times, like when me and my dad would talk in the past, and there's a lot of issues that would come up where I have all these things going on in my life, but there's no relationship that I'm quite understanding. But when he would tell me his stories and things that he went through himself and all those his struggles and his resolutions and everything, that was really uplifting to me. And it wasn't just like it was all about me and I had to open up about all this stuff. There's plenty of stuff that he was opening up about, which is that's a really important thing. And going through this, no matter what struggles come up, no matter what happens, the most important thing we want to focus on is that the relationship between the parent and the child is the most important thing. So, we're not trying to, build gaps between people. We're not trying to, have it and you become more distant from your child, because overall the most important factor is going to be that relationship between you and your child, and that's what we're really focusing on. And so the biggest thing is childmind.org, Helping Resistant Teens into Treatment by Rachel Emmerich. So that is called about finding a point of resistance. So you want to know what you're trying to figure out why your children, not just why do they look at pornography, but asking them, because if they want to watch pornography, they're not responding well to you. It's obvious that they don't want to stop looking at pornography. Is asking them why, figuring out the problem of why don't you want to stop. Because if you ask them, why are you looking at pornography? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? It seems like an attack. But if you approach it more along the ways of, why do you not want to stop? What is it about that this seems so good? And trying to understand them in that sense. And being able to address the issues of anxiety to help them overcome. And so,
What was that website again?
so that one, it's childmind.org. So childmind.org, that's me, or Rachel Emke, she's the person in that. And then another part of this would also be to helping, this whole website will help you reframe your requests and everything. We'll be able to help you get a better understanding of all of this. All right. So we have the next segment up is going to be my father talking about the challenges with learning difficulties. He's going to address this.
Okay. So some of the questions that you guys sent in were not just about resistant children, but with children with learning difficulties of some kind. You mentioned Asperger's and schizophrenia and ADHD. I was highly ADHD myself, so I get that part. Let's back up just a second here. I hear two things happening. One is a frustration of how do I get through, and the kid pushing back. Two things. One is the pornography issue, and the other is the relationship issue. So let's back up just for a second with all of these issues, and we have to understand that the relationship is most important. I'm going to go out of order here, Lucas. Would you come up here for a second? And can I get a volunteer, a very brave volunteer? I'm not going to make you do anything embarrassing, but I just need someone this takes 3 people. Just come on up. And you can, here, stand over there. Okay. So let us say, Lucas, give him room.
Yeah.
Get behind us right in the middle of this rope and just stand there doing anything right now. What's your name?
Denise.
Denise. Thank you so much. So let's say that he is my son. We don't have to pretend. And let's say that we're having some kind of disagreement. Maybe somebody mentioned my kid won't sit down and talk with me. He doesn't want to sit down and talk. My concern is that you need to understand why pornography is so dangerous. You need to understand why not to do that. He has some other concern. At this stage in his life, he could pull me off the stage if he wanted to. That didn't used to be true. But we have 2 different, I don't know why necessarily he doesn't want to talk, but he's not wanting to talk, okay? Now, as long as whatever's happening over there is happening, and I'm saying, no, you need to understand this, we're not getting anywhere. Something that can really help is, what can we agree on in common? What is really the most important? When you put your finger underneath the middle of the rope. Now, let's say that we said our relationship is what's most important. It could be being heard, that each of us get to be heard by the other person is most important. Something like that, usually relationships, so lift. And so when we both agree, keep lift high. When we both agree that our relationship, it pulls us closer together, the chances of us then hearing each other and me understanding why he won't sit down with me get greater. The chances of him hearing why I think it's important get greater. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the idea is if you can...
Thank you, Denise.
The idea is if we can find something that we can both agree on and keep coming back to that. So I will tell you that there have been things Lucas and I did not agree on. And it started to get heated. And what we decided was, wait. Let's just stop. What I fear more than anything is to lose relationship with him. And then he said, that's the same thing. I don't want that to happen. That changed the atmosphere completely. Okay? So if we are careful to say, first of all, it doesn't mean that they can do whatever they want and we can do whatever. That's not what I'm saying. But let's clarify, it's good for them to hear that you are most important to me. My relationship with you is most important. And so maybe right now, instead of talking about pornography, I need to take you out for a hamburger. Or a vegan burger. I don't know what your thing is. My daughter is a vegetarian, so she would not appreciate a hamburger. However, especially with a resistant child, or a child who's autistic, or has Asperger's, sometimes they may it's like, oh really? I'm most important to you? So sometimes they may push back against that a little bit. And we have to prove by saying no, by showing, demonstrating by how we act, that no, you are actually more important to me. So what this means is, this is kind of hard to think about. Sometimes it gets hard for us to get through our brains. Here's the question. Is your relationship with your child more important, or is it more important that they don't look at pornography? That's not what we came here to hear at this conference. But we have to think about that. Is it more important that I maintain my relationship with my child, or more important they don't look at pornography? We still hope that this happens. But we may have to start here. Does that make any sense? And so we have to focus on what can I do to strengthen this, maybe to earn the right to talk about this a little bit. and that's going to mean different things to different people. But part of our realistic outcomes is a realistic outcome is, as Lucas said, we can improve our relationship with our kid, even if nothing else changes. That is a step in the right direction. I believe we can make progress towards helping them move away from pornography, but sometimes we can't start there. Okay? The second thing is the child can learn it's safe to be honest here. Some of the defiance of things that happens is they're not sure what's going to happen. I had a parent tell me one time that when her husband talked to her son about pornography, he would just yell. He didn't want the kid to look at pornography, but it didn't work very well. He got too mad, right? That's not safe. And she knew who her son needed someone to talk to, but that's not safe. So we have to work hard to make it a safe thing. And then here's another piece to all this. To any kind of kid, whether they've got a learning disability or they're just defiant because they're just that way. There are just kids who are just defiant. You know, they don't have any other reason. That's just their personality. They want to buck every system, there is. I have a sister who is that way. We can still help them with proactive ways to deal with the underlying issues of pornography. So I'll pause just a second and talk about what that means. Jay Stringer is a therapist. He's an up-and-coming rock star. He has a book called Unwanted that has to do with people leaving unwanted sexual behaviors, most of which is pornography. And they studied 3,800 men and women who were trying to do that and found out what worked and what didn't. One of the best studies done in the last decade. Okay, very, very, very recent. This is what he discovered basically is that a lot of the main driving factor under that, even for teenagers, is an inability to deal with disappointment and anxiety. When a kid first looks at pornography, they may just be curious. When they reach puberty, like all of a sudden, maybe they saw it before, but now they really want to see it. That's a little different. That's a different issue to address. But when it becomes a compulsive pattern, it's doing something for them. They think it's sex, but that is not it. It's doing something for them. Same way people take drugs or do alcohol or whatever. Same kind of thing. And so even if they're really resistant to talking about the pornography thing, for whatever reason, we can show that we're a safe place to be heard and work on something positive by, for example, asking a kid, why is it that you can't stop looking at this? Lucas mentioned that. That's a safer question to ask. And listening to them and kind of digging. Looking for, don't even talk about pornography at all. I see you look anxious. What's going on? Talk to me about that. What are you worried about? They get really irate when they don't get what they want. Disappointment. They just can't deal with disappointment. Okay? This is a really scary thing that therapists are finding, is parents who are millennials now and are raising their kids, a very common thing now is that they're raising kids in a way that they really don't want their kids' feelings to get hurt. That does not teach them emotional resilience. If you put too big a bubble around a kid, they never learn how to deal with disappointment. And pornography becomes too hard to deal with when you can't handle simple disappointment. I did a study on working with Asian cultures related to pornography use. There's a guy up in Seattle named Sam Louie. He's a therapist that helps sex addiction, but he's Asian, and he has all these books he writes on Asian culture and this kind of stuff. Well, one of the things that Asian parents do, and I'm not telling you to copy this, but listen to the example, is when they're in the store with a little kid and their kid wants to buy a candy bar, they could buy him a candy. They got enough money, but they say, no, I'll buy you one next week if you read a book this week. Teaches delayed gratification and work ethic. Okay, now, I'm not suggesting you do that because that can turn into bribery and whatever. But you get the point is they are purposely teaching their children delayed gratification. We did this with our kids in a similar. Luke, I asked him, he doesn't remember, he must have been too small. When they would come in the store and want a candy bar or some little toy, Every once in a while I would say, we can afford that. That's not an unreasonable request, but we're not going to this time because we need to learn that we don't always get what we want right when we want it. Maybe next time or the time after we do, but not this time. So sometimes we need to teach into our children how to handle disappointment. To a young kid, not getting a candy bar is a pretty big disappointment, okay? And to a teenager whose hormones elevate the reactions by many, many, many times, that might really make them mad, okay? So sometimes we purposely have, and they have to know we're doing this. It's mean to do it otherwise. So what we're doing is, and then letting them talk about their anxiety. So what we're doing is these are the underlying drivers towards pornography, okay? So if you can't talk to them directly about pornography, maybe you can lessen the underlying drive to it by helping deal with the emotional stuff that's driving it in the first place. It's sort of like going around the back door. Does that make any sense? So again, every kid's going to be different. I'm trying to give you some tools that might work for your kids. I hope that makes some sense. You've heard this from everybody who's been talking. Encourage your kids to share when they get exposed to pornography, and don't freak out when they do. Thank you for telling me. All right. Lucas mentioned this. Sometimes the kid that doesn't want to talk is still like, I don't know. And by sharing your story first, of course, there's a lot of things in there. It would not be great for a parent to be trying to share their story if they've never, like, for example, if I was a man who was still struggling with pornography today, like that was I was still messing up all the time and wasn't doing anything to help myself. What good does it do to tell my son, yeah, I struggle too? And it's like, well, I can't give you any hope, but yeah, we want to have something positive. It's different for a dad to say, yes, I had a really bad problem with pornography, and I did this, and I still have these people I talk to about it, and I have one of these number of kind of softwares you see out there. I use that. See, look at this kind of thing, and say, let me tell you about when I was your age and how hard it was for me and what happened with me. Because in there's also hope in that case. It's like, yeah, I've done something about this. Okay. One of the things Lucas mentioned was asking them, why do you not stop? Sometimes kids will say, I can't. What they're saying is, the reason I'm getting angry and the reason I don't want to talk is because I can't. I know you did, but I can't. It's just too hard, and I'm ashamed of that, and I don't want to talk about it. The fact is they can, and you can help them. There's lots of new ways. There's all kinds of new stuff. It's great to be a parent right now because there's so many ways to help you do your job as a parent now. So sometimes the reason the kid doesn't want to talk is because they're ashamed and think, I am too broken. I don't want to admit that to you. When I was 15 years old, that's what I thought was true about me. Back then, there wasn't anywhere near the stuff that we have available to us today as parents. But I had done everything I knew how to do, and it didn't work. And so I came to the conclusion I must be the most messed up kid on the planet. And it shut me down. So some of the kids, that's what they're feeling is, I don't want to talk to you because I don't want to have to tell my parent that I'm too broken for the stuff you have to work. That's again where the relationship comes in, because you want to say, look, if that's the case, and it really is true that you can't ever stop, which it's not, but if that was the case, I still love you more than anything. Let's go out and get a hamburger. Because that's when they need the affirmation. Okay, well, I want to, another report that came out of, I don't have an online thing for it, a magazine called ADHD and Behavior. So we've been talking about some mental issues, and well, I don't know if ADHD is eventually. I'm ADHD. Narrow your focus. Focus on one thing at a time. Okay, so don't be trying to, stop lying, quit looking at porn, quit pushing your sister. Pick something, one thing. Okay, so when all these kind of issues we've talked about with in any kind of learning disability or learning issue at all, one thing at a time. When it's time for pornography, fine, but nothing else. Okay, I know that feels hard, but when a kid has to use more, see, a kid with autism or even an ADHD, they have to use way more willpower to manage to do one thing that they're trying to do than a person without that condition. So give them a break and just give them one thing at a time to work on. And then compliment them. Like if let's say you have a 13-year-old, boy or girl, I don't care. They're looking at porn every single day. And you've got stuff in place or whatever. And they only looked at porn one time this week. Instead of saying you looked at porn once, say you didn't look, you managed to avoid that and be healthy and make healthy decisions for 6 days. That's great. Focus on the positive, one thing at a time. That helps people with ADHD. Focus on improvement, not perfection. Focus on every little step that they make us in the right direction. Give them a verbal reward for success in an area that you're focusing on, even if they're not doing other things you want. So if they push their sister down and you're working on them not looking at porn, forget about the sister for a minute. Let's worry about of course the sister doesn't appreciate that a whole lot. That's one thing. Let's look at, the next section is a non-united front. But before I do that, I want to look through these texts and see if we're hitting everything. Hate anything that's a parent's idea. Wow. Telling your story is a way maybe with that.
Could you repeat the question?
The kid hates anything that's a parent's idea. That's one of the things that he texted in. A way to potentially do that is to have a parent tell their story, because telling a story is a little different than sitting down and having a talk. All right. There are some books you can read and try to apply that. Anything. I don't know how old the kid is, but the Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Edmund gets the witch gives him something pudding. I don't know. Turkish delight. There you go. And he can't stop. Turkish delight is pornography. It's perfect. Read that story with him, and say, how is Turkish delight like pornography? Well, you're kind of weaseling in your idea. Do you see what I'm saying? That's okay. We can do that. That's one example of that. I gave a handout. The handout is a bunch of statistics, of real research about the harms of pornography. You don't want to beat a kid over the head with the harms of pornography, because that's not a good idea. However, if you sense that they don't really think this is a bad thing, then I would either have them watch one of the documentaries by Fight the New Drug, because they're spectacular. But if your kid doesn't have that long of attention span, this is a shorter way to do it, and say, would you let me just share with you why I care about this? It's easier for a kid to go along with that. You're not asking them to do anything, you're just asking them to listen for just a second. And then you can say, would you read this with, there's some kind of instructions on that sheet. Would you read this with me? And look at the reason I put where those came from. Look who wrote this. This isn't some religious person. These are mainly scientists talking to each other about what they're finding. Okay, so these aren't some whack job people. These are the experts. Okay, and look at what they're finding. And then, have you ever seen? Don't ask your kid, have you felt this? Because they don't want to answer that. Say, do you think kids feel any of these? Look at these symptoms that come out of that. Do you think you've ever seen that in other kids? Tell me about that. You're kind of sneaking a conversation in with them. Don't ask them if they've experienced. They probably have experienced those things. One of them is that the child who looks at a lot of pornography becomes less bonded to their parent. You don't need to draw that out if that's happening. Let them talk about their friend who does that and is less bonded to their parent. It's easier to talk about my friend than me when you're a kid. That's beginning to make it seem safe. Aggressive kids, hopefully some of this stuff can be applied to that. Disconnected from friends and family, trying to connect at a different point, like these ideas are trying to connect at a different point. Won't sit down long enough, hopefully some of these things help. Entitlement, that they have certain levels of freedom. Entitlement's a whole different issue. I talked about some of that. Learning to not give kids everything they want and explaining to them why. Kind of letting them experience the opposite of entitlement. Maybe a good thing. We did a survey of parents. Why don't you come to things like this, right? One of the biggest answers parents gave, I don't want to make my kid uncomfortable by talking about this. Well, that mindset right there is creating a huge problem. Your kid needs to learn how to deal with being uncomfortable. It is not going to make it otherwise. The schizophrenia thing, the voices, I am not, my pay grade isn't high enough to answer that. I'm sorry, that is something that I think all the things we're talking about will help, but that's something a person would definitely need to talk with a therapist about. A kid becomes defensive when you're discussing their mistakes. They need repeated demonstration that they are most important. Hold the middle of that rope high. That needs to be driven home for them to realize it's okay to make mistakes. Admit your own mistake. Let me tell you how many times I messed up at your age. Okay, hopefully that will help a little bit. Autism stuff. Autism I can talk about. Kristen Jensen taught me this. The world's thinking brain, you get two parts of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, which is thinking brain, and your limbic system, which is all the feelings and rush for sex and that kind of thing. Autism kids apparently really deal well with the thinking brain, feeling brain concept. Are you using your thinking brain right now or your feeling brain? And Kristen's books point all this stuff out real easily. So those are, apparently that language makes a lot of sense to an autistic kid. So that's a tip I got from her. A child who thinks they know everything. They all think they know everything. One, like for example, here just a thought I had. So that sheet that I gave you, and where it says the symptoms, and ask, have you ever seen kids? You can kind of show that's an indirect way of saying I know more than you. It's like, well, the experts say that pornography causes these symptoms to happen. Have you ever seen that happen? Well, they're either going to have to lie to themselves, because those things are they happen pretty easily in teenagers, pretty obviously. Okay, so that's one way to kind of work around that, hopefully. ADHD, too distracted to stay engaged through a conversation. Whew, that was me, man. That was me. My dad would want to talk for like a half an hour. I think probably, Lucas, I was probably bad about that. Even though when I was a kid, I didn't deal with it very well. So try to do little short things. Break down to the tiny little pieces of conversation. A lot of the resources you have little short, instead of a whole conversation. Talking about your feelings, for example. Kids can be a little bit more engaged when they're sharing something about themselves. When you ask them questions, tell me about how you're feeling today. What caused that? There's a lot of studies on how to talk with your kids about feelings. Some of the stuff out there would have that. Again, with the goal is try to focus with ADHD, focus on one thing, and give the kids something positive to do. Like, every day, let's start talking about how we're feeling. Lucas, I want you, hang on one second. Challenge with a non-united front. One thing I want to mention real quickly, because we are kind of running out of time. There's another issue we haven't gotten to, and that's when the parents aren't on the same board. Either you have a single parent. I mentioned an example of when one parent wants to help with this, but when they do, they just get all mad, which doesn't help, okay? Or you get one parent that just doesn't care. This is not, it doesn't have to be this way, but very frequently it's the mom really is caring, the dad just doesn't. If they're separated or divorced, I've heard lots of stories where at home the mom's doing as she can, but her kid goes for the weekend with dad every weekend, and he just lets them look at all the porn they want to. That's just a reality. You can't fix that. But as the mom, or whichever parent, so if whichever parent's left, okay, whether it's the other parent just gets too angry, or they're not there, or whatever, then they can. The problem is, you want to be if there's two parents, you want to be the good guy. Kids learn to respect people for standing up for their own principles and saying, I know this harms you. I can't be, no matter how much I want to be your friend, I can't make it easy. I have to try to protect you. But then don't end the arguing. And then you do things like you turn off their data plan. So when they come, no matter where they go with their phone, they can't get anything. They can have the smartest phone there is. You turn off their data plan. You call the provider, say, turn off the data plan on this. They'll say, well, I'm sorry, that's a smartphone. You have to get mean with those guys. They do not want to turn off the data plan, because then you have to pay them less. Okay. Turn off the data plan. They can text. They can call. They cannot do anything else, no matter what they do to their phone. They cannot get around that. So if this, so what I'm saying is you're not having an argument. You're just saying, I have to protect you. This is my job. And I can't control what happens when you go to your dad's house or if the dad yells or the mom yells, it can go either way. Just try to take it out of it. If you have to take a drastic measure like that, say, I'm not doing this because I don't care about you or mean. It's because I know how much this can hurt you. And I know you may not understand that. And that's why you have some of the resources I gave you and the Fighting the Drug documentaries that just do a spectacular job of explaining that. Those are that kind of thing to where you're not demanding stuff and getting an argument, you just do. Does that make sense? I gave you one example. There's others that we could come up with. And what happens is, most of the time, the kid comes to respect that parent. Don't be mean about it. Don't be mean about anything. Then take them out to a hamburger. Keep that relationship high, even if you have to do some things that are cutting. Is that helping? Lucas, would you come up and tell the walking home story and when you figured out the emotions things, they can get a little picture of that?
Yes. So I know my dad was talking about the whole thing of trying to come up with a way for you to spend time with your child or children, talking about ways that they can communicate with you and you guys can keep in touch. And so one thing me and my dad had done was starting at a pretty young age. I just had my phone and I could just text and call. And I didn't have data. I don't know if data plans were around then, but I had my little phone. And so what I would do is I would text. And what it became is basically I realized that I would have like a good day at school or like good day part of at school. But by the time I got home and then my parents came home from work, that I was a little bit down or was acting different, wasn't feeling too good, right? And so there wasn't a way, if my parents asked, well, how was school? I was like, oh, well, it was okay. And it was just because, I had all these feelings walking from school or going from school. And by the time I got home and they weren't there right away, I didn't talk about it right away. And I just didn't want to talk about it later. So what we started doing was that basically every time I left from school, I would try to call my dad. And even if he couldn't answer, then he would send me a text message saying, I can't talk right now, but we'll talk when we get home. And basically just be my way of saying, okay, this happened, or I want to talk about something. And so I send it to him, and I call him whatever it is, so that I know when he gets home, even if by that point I don't want to talk about it anymore, I'll have already told him that, and so he comes home and we're ready to talk about it now. And so it's a good way that, it's me being able to open up and share things with him, and then he's able to respond right away. And there's that kind of reinforcement of knowing that he is listening, he is caring, because, he's making sure and confirming that when I get home, we are talking about it, we are getting together and discussing. And so that was just one idea that we ended up coming up with. And at first, for me, it didn't seem, as a kid, I was not at all thinking like, oh, he's just trying to talk to me, or whatever. I mean, it seemed pretty natural to me, because it was like, it's just a way to just talk about things. And even if all I wanted to talk about was, how I was at school and I had a really great day playing baseball and PE or something, and I had something fun, it's just that whole communication and being able to know that I can come to my dad with anything and be able to talk about him, and that he is going to listen and he is going to respond.
Mm-hmm. Now, what preceded this was years of us talking about, we would sit down every week and talk about how we're feeling and the things that were getting to you. And I know you've talked about kids that don't want to sit down, but talking about feelings is a little bit different. And then what came out of these conversations was the time he felt the lowest was walking home from school, because he's all by himself and he hates being by himself. And so I said, well, just call me. And so it became a ritual that we would call or text and get those kind of feelings out. And so we're talking about pornography. I realize that. But this emotional stuff is the underlying piece of it. The reason you had less problems with pornography was because you were dealing with the stuff that causes people to come home and you're all anxious and you want to go look at porn or whatever. Of course, your phone wouldn't let you. But when you were that young. I do want to quickly, we're running almost out of time, I want to quickly mention parent self-care. You need to take care of yourself, okay? Don't turn this into, you've got to just try so hard and make sure your kid is going to be okay. You need to do things like, every once in a while, get a babysitter and go out. If you can't afford to go out to eat, go to a friend's house and watch a movie with them with no kids. Take a bath. Take a hot bath. Go buy yourself a special treat, a small, like $5, something that's a treat to you. Read a good book. Take a walk. I love walking in nature. Find something that refreshes you and make sure you do that once a week, once a month, something. Have a plan. Don't just say, yeah, I need to do that. No, have a plan. Put it on the calendar. On Friday, I don't know how, but I got to get rid of the kids somehow. That kind of thing. Because if you are all anxious yourself and worn out from trying to deal with this kid that's just driving you into the carpet, you're not going to be any good. You've got to refresh yourself a little bit. Okay? We are very close to being out of time. And so if there's other questions, we've got 5 minutes. So if there's other questions, I'm just going to shut up. There's other things I was going to say, but that's fine. If there's other things that you have to text, specific questions, the number again is 503-515-6235. This question, at what age is it appropriate to share a personal story about pornography with a child? I looked at pornography the first time I was 9 when a friend showed it to me. So it was certainly my time my son was 9. Okay. Today, the average age of exposure to pornography is 9, meaning half of children are exposed before they are 9, like 6, 7 years old. The difference is what they're seeing is way worse than what I saw at age 9. Okay, so I would definitely look at Kristen Jensen's books for little kids because she's got great ways of talking about it. But then when you do that, say, now let me tell you about the first time I saw porn. How did it happen? Usually somebody showed it to you. How did I feel about it? Maybe you were excited but kind of grossed out at the same time, or if you were older, then maybe you were just excited or confused. I don't know. Be honest about it. Be honest about how it turned out not good for you in the end. There's no specific age, but I mean seriously, this mom told me her 6-year-old on a bus, some kid shoved a hardcore video porn thing in front of his face. So, any other questions? I hope I'm giving all of you something to work on. Going through a divorce, and my son blames me for it. Though my husband is an abusive addict, he's very close to his dad. This, I really hate it, but this kind of story I hear too often. What I think I'm just going to tell you what I would do. I don't know if this is the right answer. What I would do is think of some good experiences you can think of with your son. Take him out to something, ice cream, whatever he likes, and tell him those stories. Because if you remembered a happy feeling, probably he will. You're trying to rekindle that, and just focus on that relationship. That's not a time to be dealing with the porn thing right now. Because if he's looking at porn, it's because he's hurting because of the divorce.
Well, and it's like we said earlier, how the most important thing is the relationship between the child, not whether or not they're looking at pornography. So if there's only one thing that you could help or one thing you could do, that'd be just like what my dad said, is focusing on the relationship with your child, is not trying to focus on whether or not they're looking at pornography and won't talk.
Here's the thing. If you build a positive relationship with your kid, when they're 26, 30, they'll remember what you did, that you turned off their data plan, that you told them why you were concerned, and they will see it all have come true. And if you still have that positive relationship, they just might come back and say, look, I need to deal with this. What do I do? And you've been here. You know what they need to do. That's what you're holding out for. If you can't do it now, many of these situations, there are things that I shared with you can do right now. But if you can't, then you keep that relationship up there so when the time comes that they're ready, they see you as a person to go back and talk to.
Because when my dad and I first started talking about pornography and everything, I was definitely pretty young. I'd say 7 or 8 or so when we first started talking about it, maybe close to 9. But and at first I definitely hated it. It was so, I really didn't want to talk about it.
It was so awkward. I'm never going to look at that, Dad. I was like, oh, yeah.
And so, because I had never seen it before then, so yeah, I was like, oh, that sounds horrible. I wouldn't want to do that. And it was just such a horrible, awkward thing. But his way of talking about it wasn't just saying, I remember looking at this, whatever, and man, you really shouldn't do this. This is horrible. It was just simply explaining his situation, what happened, that he had looked at pornography, how it made him feel, and how, when he thinks about it now. And then so with that, and that's basically all it was. And then it wasn't even asking me, do you look at pornography? It was just simply telling his story. And then the next time that we talked about it, which is a little while later, and I actually think you might have taken me out somewhere right after that, or pretty close. And then but the next time that something like this ever came up again, he started out basically a really similar way of being like, this has happened to me and stuff like that, and tell more stories. So it got me to feel more comfortable opening up because I was able to hear what he was saying. And there was that connection between the parent and the child of having it that I knew he cared about me. I knew he wanted to listen to me because I was listening to him and he was telling me his stories. And so that was definitely something for us and that's how it all started off, was having it be that way. And so then when we talked about it further, and eventually I started sharing things, and we kept going. And then, it's what also helped too was that we had it be where it was, at least for us, we had it in our backyard doing yard work and like working on the pond. It'd always be kind of like you're doing something and you're talking about it. And so it feels less of like sitting down face to face on a couch and I'm grilling you and having like an interview with you. It was a bit more natural, and it felt more of like you're doing an activity, you're doing something where it doesn't, the kids were able to feel like it's not, we're just being grilled. Like it's a comfortable, safe place. It's not like it's,
We're going to have to end, but I think I forgot about that. When you have a hard conversation, don't do it sitting next to each, facing each other. Go for a drive. You're not looking at each other. It's way easier. And the kid can't get away. Or go, like we would go work in the yard. So you're not having to stare right at you. That's really uncomfortable. Going for a drive is actually one of the best times to, of course, then the kid never wants to get in the car with you again. But
And I think the thing I'll end it on is saying that the biggest things you should know is that you guys are the right people to be talking to your kids about this in any situation. There's nobody better besides you guys. And if you guys are broken and have bad experiences, that's even better. And you are the perfect person, and it will get better as long as you keep working through it and you remember that your parent-child relationship is the most important thing. And I think that's the most important thing to remember no matter what, is that you guys are the right people, and remember that your relationship with your child is the most important.
we got to end, but feel free to text if you have other questions.
All right.